Hello, everybody. I just finished Season 2 of My Hero Academia, and wow, did it live up to the hype that was Season 1. Season 2 was so fantastic. It kicks off with a tournament arc, for God's sakes. I sank my teeth deep into this season and learned so much about this universe that we're living in, even though it's so easy to understand. But before I dive headfirst into my review of Season 2 of MHA, I would like to ask you guys to please like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. It would help me out very dearly. But yes, the whole arc, Season 2, kicks off with Tournament Arc. Right after they come off the heels of being attacked by the League of Villains in the end of Season 1. So there's really no time to even deal with the villains in this first part of the anime of Season 2. I was almost thinking this tournament could depend, because there were so many matchups and so many students possibilities. I was like, they could really stretch this tournament out this whole season if they wanted to. If they wanted to give every fight a full episode to breathe and to develop these students, which they didn't really do that, I would say. They did not give every fight it's just desserts. But that's okay. I mean, we got a lot more out of this season because of it. And, some fights just really didn't need it. But the tournament, or the sports festival, kicks off with a race, a really cool Mario Kart style foot race with all the kids from the general studies class, the class 1B, class 1A, the sidekick class, which I've mentioned this before. I feel some of these kids in the main class 1A, I'm not going to name names, but some of these heroes, some of the main heroes in our 1A should be in sidekick class, because their abilities or their drive to be a hero is pretty lackluster, and they almost would probably fit better as a sidekick than a top dog 1A hero pro down the line. So it kicks off with a race, a foot race, which, I really thought that maybe Tetsu, I want to say his name the speedster guy with the jets on the back of his calves. I'm still learning names. Please forgive me. I'm trying my best. These names are really hard to remember. I've got a few down, but it's fine. The speedster in class 1A, I thought this might be his moment to shine. This is his gimmick. He's the speedster. And then Todoroki, our neighbor Totoro, decides to start just destroying everything in his path, and even making ice obstacles for the other kids behind him. It really looked like Todoroki was just going to win this first round. If you had asked me who I thought was going to win, I would have said the speedster kid. But I was wrong. Bakugo gets close as well, but Deku, of all people, without even using his quirk, which is insane. Like, even when it gets to the end of the race and they're trying to avoid these mines, which are, I guess, not lethal, he uses a piece of the robot that he stole earlier in the race when they were just smashing robots around, and jumps onto a pile of these mines, which launches him forward, when, in my opinion, could have launched him in any direction. But he's a smart kid, and without his quirk, he finds a way to win this foot race with kids who have abilities that increase their speed, or whatnot. I mean, it's pretty crazy to think that Deku could win this first part. I thought Deku would get his moment when it came down to the end of the tournament. I knew it would end up in a tournament style. I had a feeling, but it does. But I was just thinking, this was not Deku's forte. He's not a speedster. He has yet to even develop that part of his quirk. He's barely able to use his quirk without literally breaking in half So him winning without his quirk is pretty impressive, if you ask me. I mean, he's got the drive, to say the least. But I believe it was him, Bakugo, and Todoroki who came in the top 3 here. But after they do that, it leads the top dogs of this race end up being the ones that are kind of screwed in a way, because they have to now be the lead in this weird horse chariot thing. I don't know. They have to put headbands on with a point value, and the one who won the race has the highest point value. So now they're the biggest target. So winning the race really was a negative effect for old Deku, because now everybody was gunning for him. So this race, you have to pair up with, look like 3 or 4 different kids, and carry the top dog on your shoulders and try to keep your headband or collect as many as possible. And it seemed like the top 4 or 5 teams would get to move on to the finals, which was going to be a tournament. And Deku actually did not win this one, but he teamed up with the Birdman, the Bird Fella, and he teamed up with the girl, I believe the tech girl, the girl from Sidekick class that had some hover boots, and of course his favorite girl, Eureka, yeah, Gravity Girl. And they do pretty well in this whole segment. They give it a full, I believe it's a full episode, maybe more, to do this part of the tournament, which was actually more fun than I initially thought it would be. Seeing these kids just run around. I did feel bad for some of the students from Class 1A who didn't get opportunities to win this part of the tournament. They're like Sue, the frog lady. She didn't get a chance to move on to the next round, and I was really hoping to see more of her, because she is my personal favorite female character, probably my favorite character in this show so far, so I do have a bias there. And she was kicking ass in Season 1, so I really wanted to see her go head-to-head with some of these kids and maybe win a couple rounds. But, you know, she had a really cool team with her and the perverted guy with the sticky balls and the dude with the 6 arms. They had a cool strat, but somehow they lost, even though they were well protected. There was a few kids from the Class 1B who even said that they lost the first round on purpose because they knew it would make them a target in the next round or something. Kind of makes sense, you know. They came in middle of the pack instead of trying to overdo it. But in the end, this really didn't do much but just line up our top 16 competitors for the finals of this sports festival. One thing that did interest me about this whole tournament was they were talking about taking kids out of Class 1A if they did too poorly. They would take them out of Class 1A and they would be switched out with kids from General Studies or the Sidekick class, and have to go down a notch in their journey to become a pro hero. And I like that idea because, like I said, there are a few of these kids, like the tape arms guy that shoots tape out of his elbows, or even the dude with the sticky balls on his head. They don't seem pro material. But I digress. So we get past this segment of the tournament. Deku does not win this, but he comes up right. I believe they come in last, technically, of the ones who move on. But thanks to Birdman and his cool shadow ability, he was able to get enough of those headbands to continue on, because someone did end up taking Deku's headband, which is cool. You know, it was unexpected. There was a really cool moment at the end where it came down to Bakugo, Todoroki, and Deku all like leaping into combat, and then time running out right before they can even make contact, which makes so much sense. I'm glad it didn't come down to the wire into a big clash. They actually cut them off before they could even go crazy about it. So it moves on to this tournament. I pulled up the bracket here on my phone just so I can remember who fought who in order. The tournament was pretty cool. They actually, a couple kids from the last round decided to drop out and allow kids that they felt earned spots in the finals take their place, which was good because the kids that weren't, I think it was, gosh, I can't remember who they were, but they dropped out, and we got a couple more kids from Class 1B, which is awesome. Because there's a couple of those kids I'm really interested in. So the first fight was Bakugo versus Shinzo. Shinzo is this creepy kid that reminds me of, I think his name was Bones in Yu-Gi-Oh! He was a zombie type user in Yu-Gi-Oh! The anime. And he kind of has that same look with the bags under his eyes and whatnot. He kind of looks like a villain in a way. And they kind of played that into his character because his ability turns out to be, if you talk to him and answer a question or something, he can control you, control your body, as long as nothing interrupts that link, I guess. And so Deku immediately answers one of his questions, gets locked into his ability, and he tells him to walk out of bounds, which is a great strat. I mean, but I was wondering what his plan was if it didn't work with one of the other kids and he had to go hands to hand. And I feel like this kid, he's got a lot of potential with that ability. It definitely seems like a bad guy ability to be able to control somebody. And it also seems like a lot of people wouldn't want to be his friend if they has that kind of ability. It's very sneaky. But I could see him becoming pretty badass down the line if he had a way to fight hand to hand. Because Deku found a way to flick or move a finger just enough to wake him up out of the control and not fall for that trick again. And he comes in, throws the kid out of the ring pretty easily. They get into a little bit of a scuffle, but this Shinzo dude did not have a plan really for a hand-to-hand combat. So Deku moves on, unsurprisingly, but this other kid it seems like they're setting this other kid up to do more down the line. Or maybe it was just the one time we'll see him, but I was kind of hoping they'd move him up to Class 1A and we'd lose some of the dead weight in 1A. So we move on to round 2, match number 2, Todoroki, our neighbor Totoro versus Zero, I believe is the tape fella? The tape arms, tape elbows. I was like, what is this kid doing in this bootleg Spider-Man kid doing in the tournament? This far into the tournament, there was this spot should have went to the 6-armed guy or Sue. I mean, geez, those characters are way cooler. But okay, so I can't remember it too well. I'm pretty sure Todoroki just locked him up into ice. I'm almost positive he just froze the whole, like he just did a huge ice barrier freezing the kid. I believe he was a little pissed off about his father being there or something. We learn a lot about Totoro's past and how his mother burned his eye, his side of his face with the fire, with the red hair, because it reminds her of her abusive husband or whatever her endeavor it was to her. But yeah, he was a project child, and he was made to be the number one hero of the future. Number one pro. So he beats Tape Elbows very quickly with a huge technique. And this kid seems so overpowered, so OP. It's almost too much. But I'm beginning to like this Todoroki kid. I thought he'd be a little too Sasuke for me at first. Too edgy. Too edgy for me. But he's starting to change and become a different character now. The next round was against this green-haired lady, Shiozaki, and Kaminari, the electric dude, who is also one of my favorite characters because when he uses power too much, he becomes very dumb. And he just makes this really funny face, and I still think it's hilarious. And I hope they just keep doing that gimmick. And that match went pretty fast as well. She is some type of poison ivy type character, but I think it's just her hair is like a plant, and she can grow it and send it underground, and it's like these plant tentacle type things. There wasn't enough showing from her to see her limitations, but she basically took him out because the electricity wasn't going to pass through her hair, and she was pretty badass. I hope we get to, I want to see her move up into Class 1A. Out of all the kids that made it up out of Class 1B, she was really strong, and that hair gimmick is cool as F. She takes him out pretty quickly. It comes to the next round, which is our speedster dude, Ida versus Hatsumi, which is the tech lady, the sidekick lady, and she is basically using this time to show off all of her equipment to the people, the pros, because she just wants to be a sidekick. She realizes this is her moment. I think she would have been smarter to try and win this round with her tech, beating a future pro, then do the big reveal. Maybe she just thought there was no way she could win a one-on-one fight on her own, and the best option was to use this fight to show off all her cool tech, and then she walked out of bounds, which really didn't do much for our speedster fella. But he wins. He moves on up. He's moving on up to the east side. Then we move on to Ashido and Aomi. I don't know. Like I said, these names are tough. And it's Belly Button, Naval Laser Man, and Pink Fluffy Lady, Slime Lady. And she actually surprised the hell out of me. Naval Laser Dude is not much of a challenge thus far. He's got that neat little laser, but he ends up getting a tummy ache, which was expected. I almost thought he might find a way to win, knock her out of bounds, or she'd slip on her own slime. But she threw some of her acid on his little laser gun, and it burned his tummy. She knocked him out of bounds, I believe, and she moved on, which is really cool because, she's one of the few females that actually got a really cool little boost there. She hadn't had a lot of opportunities to show what she could do, but that was a cool way to do it. Then we moved on to Momo and the bird dude. And the bird dude surprised. I thought Momo was going to possibly win this because she can create anything out of her body. She can create anything out of her body, which is a really cool gimmick. And as long as she understands what it's made of. And she's very smart. I thought she was going to find a way. But turns out this bird guy has a really cool shadow ability. Other than just being a Birdman, and it's pretty OP as well, and very quickly knocks her out, and he moves on, and it's almost sad for Momo. I was like, man, she should have moved on, and then the girls could have fought in the next round, but it makes sense, because later on they call back to it with her not believing in herself, even though she's a very smart character. She should be the strategist. She should be the Shikamaru of this show, I think. Maybe she will turn out to be. She should be the one that... She's so smart of a character, gimmick-wise. She should be the one that can figure shit out and also summon weapons that she can use to her strategy. It makes so much sense for her ability to be a strategic character. Then we move on to the Battle of the Metal Man and... Kurashima, the guy that gets hard, didn't explain exactly what his because the other guy turns to metal, and then he ends up they end up tying, and then later having a arm wrestling contest to see who moves on, and the Metal Man loses because he didn't eat enough iron that day or something. And that makes sense to be one of his weaknesses. If he doesn't eat enough iron, it makes so much sense. But what keeps Kirishima hard, if you know what I mean? Then we move on to Uraka and Bakugo, which turned out to be way more fun than I thought it was going to be. this one-on-one fight between this girl who you were thinking had no chance against Bakugo, who is being put as one of our top contenders here. Explosive. He actually goes pretty hard on her and just keeps her at bay because he knows if she touches him, she can make him, end his take his gravity away and then drop him out of bounds, which would not be good. She ends up using his explosions to her advantage and taking all the rubble around them and floating it above them. Very Piccolo of her, like Hellzone grenade of her, and then dropping all the rubble from above onto Bakugo, who shows everybody just how powerful he is when he explodes it into nothingness. He does such one move destroys all the rubble above him, which almost seems like it wouldn't work that way when he did so, but I was cool with it. Bakugo seems very also OP. We'll have to see where his limits lie. We move on to round 2. I'm going to try and speed this here up. We got Midoriya versus Todoroki. This fight was interesting. Midoriya learns that Todoroki has been holding back his fire side this whole time because he doesn't like his father and he wants to represent his mother, who's in a psych ward because of his father, and he's got daddy issues and all that fun stuff. But Midoriya wants to help him out because Midoriya is a real hero and he believes in helping people even when they don't ask to be helped. Even though he probably could have won if he just shut his mouth and let him only use one side of his power, because Todoroki is so strong if he starts using his fire side. And it seems like if he uses one side over the other, he doesn't have it's a negative. He starts to freeze on one side. I'm curious if he uses a fire side too much, does he start to burn on one side? But down to the wire, Midoriya starts to break his arms and legs in this fight. He starts using the flick gimmick he's been using, where he's been flicking finger after finger, breaking fingers as he does it. And that was really cool, and it showed how much resolve he has, being willing to break your finger not once, but a few times. He ended up using the same broken fingers a couple times, causing permanent damage to his hand, which I do love that they seem to be emphasizing that if you overdo it with your ability, you can have permanent damage, just like with I'm not for sure, but All Might has permanent damage, and now his powers are weakened. I wonder if there's a connection here, but it seems like Deku damaged his hand. There's a scar there permanently, showing him you can't just do that. But he uses what he had to keep up with this kid, and he barely loses in a lot of ways, and he goes out of bounds, and I'm glad they didn't let him beat Todoroki yet. Save that for later. Deku is still a young man who just got his power and still trying to figure this all out. Todoroki moves on. We move on, and Ida, Speedster, versus the grass-haired lady, the plant-haired lady, the poison ivy lady, and he basically uses his speed to take her out of bounds almost immediately. And it was kind of not cool, because she's super cool of a character, and I hope we see more of her. She's got a cool ability. We move on to the next round. It's Birdman versus Fluffy Pink Lady, and she gets basically one-shotted out of the ring as well by his OP ability. He's basically using this shadow of his to win all the fights, and it definitely makes me think that can he go hand to hand, because I don't think I've ever seen him yet fight without the shadow. That is a curious question. Is that his weakness? Is he the weakness of his little team he's got there? And it seems like his shadow can talk, and it's got its own mind. Then Kirishima, who won the arm wrestling, moves on to fight Bakugo. Bakugo kicks his ass. Kirishima does have a limit to his abilities of protecting himself. But that moves on. Todoroki takes on Ida. Todoroki's just way too strong, and basically Ida tries to run him out of bounds with his super speed, but ends up foolishly grabbing Todoroki's ice side, and he ends up freezing Ida, and so forth. He's very dangerous. Todoroki is so strong. Bakugo ends up beating Birdman. Bakugo versus Todoroki in the finals. It was very hyped up. I was excited. I was excited for this to be the finals. It was. I mean, I really couldn't have told you who was going to end up in the finals. There was a lot of options they could have went with, but I liked this option. These are the two top dogs. I think one other option would have been to allow the female characters one of the female characters to end up in the top 4 at least. They didn't have. I mean, none of them are OP enough. Maybe the plant lady could have made it to the finals. Like I said, they could have made Momo here into a strategist and had her win every fight using strategery. She's just so smart. If she's got enough prep time, she could win. That's what they should have went with her. I'm hoping that's where it's leading. Maybe that's where she'll end up because she's so smart of a character. But yeah, Bakugo ends up winning this fight mostly because Todoroki was refusing to use his fire side still, even though I thought we got past this with his fight with Deku, but boy was I wrong. Yeah, Todoroki loses by, I believe, ring out, but he did everything he could. There was a big explosion because I believe he tried to use his fire. I want to know what limits this kid has. I mean, he seems to just keep going and going. Ice, fire, ice, fire. Bakugo wins in a hilarious fashion because he doesn't feel like he won, even though I feel like he won fair and square. He felt like Todoroki was holding back, and it's on him. If you won the biggest. If he didn't act like a total fool the whole time, people would have respected the crap out of him, and that's basically what Bakugo wants, is respect. And he decided to act like a total fool. It was really funny because they were giving out medals, and he was all chained up because he was acting like a dickhead. But he's going to have a heart attack if he doesn't change his hot-headedness. I'll tell you that much. So yeah, that was cool. That was an interesting part of Season 2. The tournament, the festival, probably the biggest part of Season 2. After that, we hopped right into setting up our villains and a training arc, mostly with Deku training with Gran Torino. Pulled that name out of my head. Gran Torino, this old hero who nobody really knows who he is, but I guess he was a mentor of All Might, and I guess he's like the Master Roshi of this show, or the Jiraiya of this show. He's got this really cool pulsing ability where he can basically bounce all around. He starts basically teaching Deku. This whole part of the story was trying to teach Deku how to use his ability without breaking his body in half. And he basically taught him that you can use 5% of your power, or a certain percentage of your power. I'm like, you couldn't figure that out, bud? But yeah, so he starts he learns that he can use about 5% of his power, and he's got to use it constantly. The problem was he was turning it on and off like a car engine when he really needed to leave it running for a long period of time so his body can get used to it. While this is all happening, the other students are also learning under different mentors from different hero agencies, because there's different hero agencies that hire them, which is pretty cool. This whole world has its whole superhero system built in. It seems like there's a lot of lore that they haven't dove into yet about what happened when heroes first arrived, and how they took the idea of heroes making money to be heroes. One thing, there's a villain called the Hero Killer. I think that's all he called him. He might have had a name. Hero Killer. He looks like one of the monsters from Small Soldiers. I'll try and find a picture. He looks like this guy from Small Soldiers, the movie Small Soldiers. But he was really cool, and I think he was meant to be pretty cool. He's got a cool ability is if he licks your blood. tastes your blood. He can paralyze you for a certain amount of time based on the type of your blood, which is pretty cool. But not only that, it seemed like he trained himself, because that's his only quirk that I know of, but he's trained himself to be a physical badass, because he's shown taking on top pros and then later taking on three of these kids at once, Todoroki being one of them, OP motherfucker. But before all that, he paralyzes Ida's older brother, who's a speedster. That's got to be the worst thing possible to happen to a speedster-type hero, is to be paralyzed. I really think they should have just let him kill him. I am very curious as if this show is going to lead to any major deaths. I really hope it does. I know we're still building. It's only season 2. But season 3, I feel, needs to have a major death. I think that they even could have killed Ida off in this season, and it would have made sense. Because Ida becomes obsessed with this hero killer. His brother is put in the hospital, barely survived. Still think he should have died, unless they're going to bring him back later for something important. Pushes Ida over the edge. I almost thought they were going to put Ida into a whole new gimmick, change his whole lifestyle. Instead of being this pretty straight up kid that follows all the rules, I thought he might start becoming a villain-ish type character, breaking the rules so he can get what he needs done. And he wanted to kill the hero killer, or at least capture him. And he was not listening to anybody. He went head first. At some point after the training arc basically ended, or midway through the training arc, when all the kids are training with different, there was a few gags with other kids, but really the only one that made any difference was Deku training with Gran Torino. Gran Torino and Deku end up going out into the streets to catch bad guys. Turns out the same day as they decide to do that, the dude with all the hands, the leader of the villains, decide to release like 3 or 4 Momus, these freaking heroes that were villains that were manipulated into these monsters who have multiple quirks, and release them into the city, causing chaos. At the same time, the hero killer was killing heroes in the darkness. He had this native hero, dead to rights. Here comes Ida to save the day, but really just to kill this man and capture him, whatever he wants to do. Barely gets a strike in before he gets paralyzed by the hero killer. The hero killer wasn't going to kill him. He seems to have a code. Like, he wasn't going to kill this kid. He's not even an adult yet. It seemed like he did not want to kill him if he didn't have to. It seemed like he only wants to kill real pros that he deemed not real heroes, because they take money to be a hero, and so forth. He almost kills Ida, had the sword to his back, and he's like, well, if your goal is to come kill me, I need to kill you now. You are not worthy. Goes to kill him. Deku comes out, decks him, and says, not today, bud. But man, wouldn't it have been something if they killed off a character right there, one of the students, and then used his slot to move up one of the kids from another class? If he had died making that mistake, it would have been such a crazy lesson for the rest of the kids to learn about going out for vengeance instead of being, going out to be a hero. They all grow together here in this fight. Todoroki gets a message from Deku, and I'm assuming he sent it to the whole class, but Todoroki happened to be around with his father, training as well, and they were fighting the Momus, Nomus, what the hell they call them. While Endeavor and Gran Torino were taking care of them, they had this epic 3-on-1 fight with Todoroki, Ida, and Deku, and it was very fun. I really wasn't sure. I still thought maybe this guy might kill Ida in the middle of this fight, or Ida would have to make the ultimate sacrifice so he wouldn't just be the cause of all these deaths. But they ended up taking him out, actually, without help from any of the pros who eventually showed up. At some point, the hero killer escapes, kills Momu, sets off this whole viral video around the world, and everybody starts seeing this guy as a martyr, kind of like a anti-hero type character now. At least the people of this world, they see this video online. He seems to be someone that resonates with some people out there, and there's other villains that get inspired by him and want to carry on the hero killer's legacy, even though he's not dead yet. I have a feeling we have not seen the last of the hero killer, even though I don't think he stands a chance against All Might. Which later leads to All Might talking to Deku about the hero killer tasting his blood. And I didn't even put this together when it happened, but I was thinking this when Deku first got the One for All power. I was like, what would happen if a villain tastes your blood or somehow ingests your hair or something? And that happened, and I didn't even think about it until All Might brought it up, and neither did Deku. He tasted his blood. So does he have the power now? That would make a lot. They could have went in that direction, because he didn't really have the strength, because he seemed to want to fight All Might. But it would have been interesting to see the hero killer now have power thanks to Deku's mistake, letting him taste the blood. That would have been insanely interesting to realize that now he's OP like him, but he's got the training to not break himself in half when he uses this ability. But All Might reveals that you can only transfer the power if you have to be willing to. You have to want to give the power to somebody else, which is kind of a lame thing, because I thought that was a major weakness. I was like, man, as long as the villain knows, he could just take a piece of your blood and take all your power, or at least copy your power and be able to keep up with you. But you have to want to give someone your abilities, which makes sense and definitely takes away that raring weakness that I thought of when he first gave him a piece of his hair. Because I was like, you're telling me your hairs don't fall out sometimes? I believe from there, we moved on to the finals of this whole Season 2, which was a team up. They had the students of Class 1A. By the way, they did not move up any kids from Class B or the General Studies class. They did not move anybody up at all, even though they said they might. They keep warning these kids, because there's a lot of kids that should not be in this major class. So they ended up moving to the end of this semester, basically, and their final test is to take on one of the pros. Instead of a robot, they're going to take on a pro. They had to do a written exam, which was pretty lackluster. They didn't do it like they did in Naruto, where it was this big event and they had to use their abilities to pass or anything like that. It was just a regular test. They skipped right on by it. They showed them study for like a half a second, and most of them passed just fine. But now they have to pair up in teams of 2 and go 2v1 against pros that are in the school, but the pros will be limited with weights that are half their body weight, which was really cool, and they gave a lot of the kids opportunities to win. I think it was implied that the teachers were holding back, because they feel like they were pretty strong. And the only kid that I think that could even keep up would be Todoroki or Bakugo or Deku, I guess. But they're just not at that level yet. These kids are getting, and we got these pros here, these Jonin level or higher teachers. I believe the first round was the Cement Mixer Man versus our hard boy, and I guess this guy that's in the team, that's in Class 1A, that I barely seen. He looks like the ultimate muscle dude. I guess he gets strong if he consumes enough sugar, but very quickly gets really weak, sugar low, if he does not continue to eat sugar, I believe. But it doesn't last long. He waits them out by continuously summoning concrete walls, and eventually consuming them when they run out of their quirk, showing us all that every quirk has some type of limitation, and you have to be willing, you have to strategize around that. They are not built for a long fight. They should have went around instead of going plowing their way through. They definitely made a major mistake there. One of my favorite fights here was my favorite girl Sue and Birdman teaming up against this dude that could shadow clone, make multiples of himself. That was really cool. They had a really cool way of winning. She had the handcuffs that they had to get onto the pros to win, get the handcuffs on them to win inside of her stomach, which she could keep inside of her stomach with her frog abilities. And she gave it to the Shadow Man, his shadow ability to get the lock on him, and they passed. I thought that was a really cool way of moving them on. We also learned about one of the characters who really doesn't say anything. He's kind of a mute, and I guess he can talk to animals of all kinds, including bugs. And they end up using the bugs to beat the announcer guy, who turns out to be a hero. Did not know he was a hero. Thought he was just some announcer fella. He's got the, Black Canary sound ability, and it was pretty cool. That was pretty, it was fine. I'm trying to think if there's any others that stood out. So a few students failed and a few didn't. Gravity Girl had to team up with Naval Laser, and they passed just barely, and it almost seemed like they shouldn't have passed because they were basically just talking about how much she has a crush on Deku, and I'm getting a little sick of her high school girl crush on Deku gimmick. It's like I like the fact that she wants to become a hero to help her parents out, help them retire money-wise, help them with money. I think that's a really noble way. A noble reason to become a hero. At first, it seems kind of selfish, but it makes so much sense when you hear the whole story. But they barely win. They beat the Android 13 character. Barely. Just, she lets them, I don't know why it happened. She got sucked in by the vortex, and then she, ducked, and then kicked her or something. I don't know. Seemed like they should have failed theirs. A lot of the kids passed that I don't think needed to pass, or they shouldn't have passed, because they barely had a strategy. Like the sticky ball guy, because he teamed up with Tape Arms, and I thought, oh, okay, this will be a squash fight. But somehow he finds a way to stick her to the ground with his sticky balls or something and run away. He ran away along with Tape Arms. But it all leads up to the main event. Oh, one more thing. Momo and Todoroki team up, and I thought that fight was really fun because it really showed off our resident Kakashi character, the Eraserhead, erasing their quirks, and they have to figure this out. And this was making me realize that maybe she is smart enough to be a strategist type fighter, which I think that they should lead her character into being. She needs to be the female Shikamaru of this show. She's got this crazy cool ability where she can summon any physical weapon or physical item, and she uses her strat to win this fight, and they barely pull it off, but because Eraserhead's a badass, his only weakness is he can't blink, and they're going nuts. Even with how overpowered Todoroki is, he's keeping them at bay, and only because of her strategy did they find a way to actually put cuffs on this guy. We move on to the finals. We've got Bakugo and Deku forced to team up against All Might of all people, which I was like, well, these guys need to run because this guy is Superman. How are you going to do that? Turns out Bakugo doesn't want to work with Deku. Surprise, surprise. He starts going head first with All Might. Deku thinks that All Might is the god of everything and will not fight him, does not want to fight him. Turns out they need to work together to win. Pretty, obvious plan here. Obvious direction they're going with. They end up mending their bond a little bit, working together. Turns out he can load up his little grenade guns and give it to somebody else to launch, which is pretty cool. I also have a question about his Bakugo's ability, because he fought Todoroki when there was ice everywhere, and it's based on sweat. How much sweat is coming out of this kid's hands? Because after All Might destroys the grenade launcher devices, Bakugo says those were actually built to keep me at bay, to keep me held back. I can actually launch huge explosions out of my hands if they're not on my hands. And he starts blowing up All Might face first. And it almost seems like this plan was for Deku to run away, get out of the area to go find help and win the test. Turns out Deku says, "No, sir," comes in, punches All Might with everything he's got, seemingly, saves Bakugo, who pushed himself to a point where it looked like it was hurting him. It was hurting his hands to launch these big explosions, which was surprising. They pass together as a duo. We learn All Might's got some type of secret later when he's So that's basically the end of Season 2. Other than the League of Villains growing, there's these 2 new villains that popped up that I barely learned anything about. This one teeny bopper girl and this zombie-looking dude, and they're joining the League of Villains. There's also a head of the League of Villains called All for One, who is the opposite of One for All, and he is going to be a big deal going forward. But yes, Season 2 was fantastic. I tried to get in detail as much as possible without making this video go too much longer. I really enjoyed Season 2. If you have not watched My Hero Academia, you are missing out. And you need to hop in on it immediately. What did you think of Season 2 of My Hero Academia, if you have watched it? I'm about to watch the movie Two Heroes, I believe it's called, and then head right in to Season 3. Head first, sink my teeth into Season 3, and I'm very excited. I'm Mr. Morfetto. Like I said, please like, comment, and share, and subscribe. I'll talk to you later.